Today on Spotlight Now, we continue on in our conversation about rediscovering Hawaii's soul.
We are talking with 3 community leaders about their involvement in this movement and how you can get involved. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha and thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday afternoon. We are, as we said, talking about rediscovering Hawaii. So a movement that we've talked about several times on this show and really talking to community leaders who are actively involved in the process. One of those leaders joins us now, our first guest this afternoon, Kamana O'Crab. Thank you so much for being here. Let's begin just sort of talking about what rediscovering Hawaii Soul is. For those people out there who may not really know what this movement is all about and are just being introduced to it for the first time.
Sure, thank you. Rediscovering Hawaii Soul is sort of a movement that came out of a convening between business leadership from Hawaii Executive Collaborative, a number of Native Hawaiian community elders, and different stakeholders about 2 years ago. And it was really just to better understand the working relationship with the community, government, and then business community. What happened was, as a result of that convening, we came up with sort of a vision of rediscovering Hawaii's soul, meaning what is everything that is so precious about Hawaii, its people, its land, its culture, its values, and then how do we keep that sort of intact for the future generations. Recently, in the past several years, we've gone through tremendous sort of conflict, and I think the business leadership felt that we needed to do some things differently civically to try to address them and better understand these issues as we move forward. And so rediscovering Hawaii's soul is about Hawaii as a whole, as a people and as a land. And because we are a island state archipelago, there was an agreement on we have to develop this island consciousness of giving back to the land, which was really rooted in Hawaiian values, and the whole idea of reciprocity. As we build, we need to replenish. As we look at climate change and future sustainability issues, you know, what can we do to offset sort of, the carbon footprint, and then reinvest in replenishing our upland forests, native plants, replenishing coral beds in our ocean. It's really adopting some of the real basic fundamentals of Hawaiian culture and practices. And then how do we merge that civically in our movement as a state moving forward? Yeah.
And for folks who aren't familiar, Hawaii Executive Collaborative is a consortium of CEOs from around the state who gather on an annual basis for a big conference and also throughout the year do other work together to try to make Hawaii a better place for all of us. One of the things that's interesting is your involvement now with the Rediscovering Hawaii Soul movement. I think a lot of people know you from your work with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, but tell us about your role in RHS and why you decided to take this on.
Sure. I was originally asked by the leadership of HEC to get involved, and actually it started before 2022 because myself and several other Hawaiian elders were involved with Mauna Kea, and then trying to bridge that gap with the HEC leadership, business community, Hawaiian community, and state government. And so as I transitioned, there was a need to sort of help our leaders better understand some of these issues. And over time, we had conversations, not just on Mauna Kea, but for example, Mauna Kea is part of a ceded land issue, which is a public land trust responsibility by state government, and how Hawaiians are very attached to ceded lands from the Hawaiian Kingdom era, and then now we have these issues, and then how do we get the Hawaiian voice involved? And so with that, we commenced on a strategy actually to engage Native Hawaiian community elders and community to better understand these issues. And so it seemed like I was a natural fit to bridge community leaders, community culture, and business leadership, and then bring in Native Hawaiian stakeholders that usually would not be part of discussions that we have at the table of executive leadership. So now it seems to be evolving. I'm now the executive lead for Rediscovering Hawaii Soul. And part of that is, again, the component of Hawaiian culture, values, and practices, and then coming up with a framework that we all agree on as executives, as business leadership, community, and hopefully government, where these are values of community, land, caring for stewardship, and then how do we move forward from here in making Hawaii a better place?
And we're going to see an example of what you just described in the next half of this show with a community leader as well as a business leader coming together to talk. So you want to make sure that you continue to stay tuned for that conversation as we continue on in this segment. I want to just ask, how is this different from other movements that's happened in the past? Because I think for many people who may be watching and aware of the struggles that the Native Hawaiian community have had with having their voice heard, about having and feeling like they have a seat at the table, this is nothing new. What do you think makes this movement in particular different, and how are you trying to address some of the concerns and some of the things that Native Hawaiians in the past felt were neglected?
Right. Excellent question. And I think what it really came down to was really valuing and respecting each other. We understand, like, Hawaiian culture, aloha. Hawaii itself is a brand that really catapults Hawaii's economy. So I think many Hawaiian community leaders understand that. But then at the same time, there's this rejuvenation and movement within the Hawaiian community that we want to be part of the conversation in driving our place here in Hawaii, which involves quite a bit. It is not new, like all of these issues, but I think what's different is that the executive leadership took time to listen to elders. We usually think of Hawaiian leaders always, either you're politically elected or you're in government. But this was quite different, where we really reached out to Native Hawaiian community leaders as well as other community leaders from throughout the state, and then having diverse opinions talk about the real issues. And then building relationships to collaboratively come up with strategies and initiatives that we believe that can impact greater systemic change across the state, but also develop momentum of getting other people involved. And so that's when we started to realize the power of this is Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, is getting back to basics of aloha, respect, trust, and pilina relationships. And that's all part of the framework in which we move forward with.
And talking about the initiatives that you're now working on, there are areas where you're hoping for some tangible results.
Sure.
So I know that there is climate, there's tourism, there is military. Talk about these different committees and what you're hoping actually comes to pass with these convenings.
Yes. So we as a result of our collective work, what we realized is we needed to reach out to many other stakeholders. And so we put out a call. We asked people to come 2 years ago to the convention center. Actually, it was last year. And we said, hey, this is what we started off with, of looking at the future in the future. And we looked at all of these different scenarios. And what we realized was that people actually responded to them, and they felt like that the work that we did was right on point in terms of changes that needed to be made across the state in education, in health, with regard to the military presence here in Hawaii and all the other issues related to it. We needed to take a look at Native Hawaiian rights and ceded lands as part of public land trust. We looked at climate change. And so it's almost like we extended the call and the broader reach and brought different organizations. We have over 300 organizations that are involved. We have about 250 individuals of leadership, community that are now collaborating together to work on common issues in their subject matter areas. Yeah.
One of the things that struck me in being part of those conversations and witnessing some of this in action was that necessarily these are some issues that continue to be very polarizing, and they're very different viewpoints.
Right.
And it's not a matter, let's say, of finding common ground at times even. It's just that respect, just that understanding, and that seemed to have just lacked in all different phases and all different issues that we've seen in the past. How do you find that just having that respect will ultimately lead to some sort of resolution for some of these major issues that continue to plague our state?
Sure. Usually many times when we have a very strong conflict, we want to dive into the problem and then kind of the policy end or the advocacy but what we found is people have to be really committed to building relationships and trust. And so from the beginning, we start with cultural protocol in a way to spiritually ground everyone. And everyone comes in as equals. And what we strive to do is set out a process where it's not just advocating for your platform or position. It's really trying to understand where others are coming from, and how does that either lead to greater strategies or initiatives that are more collaborative, or at least it helps to clarify what the issues are, so we can have a better conversation and discussion rather than kind of very conflictual or adversarial.
And what's interesting also is that you are not necessarily doing this alone. You have the partnership with Rios Partners,
Yes.
who I would love for you to explain to folks who Rios Partners is and what their role is in facilitating this work.
Oh, thank you, Yanji, for that. So our work actually started with Rios Partners, and because they are a international group, they've worked with Australian Aborigines, First Nations people from Canada, and working with Native Hawaiian and executive leadership here in Hawaii. They started their work coming out of the South Africa transition from that government out of apartheid during the Nelson Mandela era. And so they developed a process very similar to Hawaiian cultural values and Ho'oponopono. And it is based on bringing diverse groups together. But also what's more important is leadership. You must engage leadership from diverse backgrounds and opposing backgrounds, and to get them into a room where they all collectively agree on similar values that lay out the boundaries or the rules of engagement on how we interact and engage. The movement of agreement, it may be slow in the beginning, but as we gain momentum, there's greater synergy amongst the leaders, and I would have to say that sometimes you're closer than you're farther apart, but it's really maintaining the trust relationship with each other, and then really committed on addressing it together.
And you know, Hawaii, of course, is not alone in some of the conflict that we see here in our community between locals and a native population community, as well as a business community. You similarly have witnessed this in such areas like Alaska, where
Yes.
that's also happening. If you can share what you're learning from other states and other communities who maybe are going through this same type of struggle.
Sure. As a result of the work we were doing here with Rios, they found it a opportunity to send me to Sitka, Alaska, where an organization they're very different from Hawaii Executive Collaborative, but a very grassroots community organization called Spruce Root. The executive director there was Alana Peterson, and what Rios introduced to Spruce Root and their network, because they were tackling the largest rainforest in the Americas. It extended from Alaska all the way down to Washington, Oregon, several hundred, miles of rainforest. But they engaged Native Alaskans, First Nations people from Canada, and what they asked me to do is to be a cultural content expert and helping them understand some of the issues like we're dealing with, such as land, Native Hawaiian rights, water, stewardship, climate change and sustainability, reforestation. And what I found was actually they were dealing with very similar issues and how they were handling it. And so we basically shared, our experience, strength, and hope with each other, what was working here and what was working there, but also understanding the challenges. And then through that conversation, we were able to, help them move along in some areas where we were strong in, and vice versa. Yeah.
I'm interested to know how you sort of measure success with something like this. What kind of shifts have you felt in yourself, and where do you hope this movement goes?
Yeah. Well, what we found that was most important is educating and informing the broader public, but we're also focused on educating leadership, and so we've adopted a Hawaiian concept of opuali'i. So opuali'i is benevolent leadership, and that is tied to having an intimate understanding of the use of land and water, because they go hand in hand. And then as you merge those two, it's critical for the people. And so we're measuring us in terms of a lot of the executives and community leaders that actually commit to rediscovering Hawaii. So like I shared, we have over 300 organizations in relatively like 2 years. And we're working on probably over 6 initiatives right now. And we all come up with action-oriented milestones that we measure. So what we hope to do is actually measures that actually will trigger change across the state.
Yeah, and going to that second part of the question, which is what kind of shifts have you felt in yourself in doing this work?
Well, what I realize for myself is that now that we've adopted this framework of Hawaii doing everything what we can do to protect, perpetuate Hawaii, and island consciousness and reciprocity, I found that we really have to engage and groom the next generations for the next 40, 50 years and beyond, because I think what we've unveiled in rediscovering Hawaii's soul is I believe we're creating a movement that really this is Hawaii, but we need a mass sort of understanding and agreement to make Hawaii a better place. And so if we can educate the younger generations to come, but also groom and mentor leaders to carry that role and responsibility forward, I think we can leave Hawaii in a better place.
You were talking about just some of the growth, the measurements of success, and it sounds like things have really picked up in momentum as you're describing the organizations, the initiatives that you folks are now undertaking and adding to this movement. I'm wondering if you can share what that looks like. Is it you folks going in to talk to businesses and companies? Is it training modules? What does that tangibly look like for the organization as you continue to try to get this message out?
Yes. So I guess one strand is definitely talking to organizations and get buy-in from their leadership. And then by giving those presentations, we leave it up to the leadership and the organization for them to decide on what initiatives they want to get involved with. Some of the organizations we got involved with was like St. Andrew's Prairie School, Bank of Hawaii, American Savings Bank, Department of Education. And so when we've talked about what is important to us in terms of leadership, AINA, community, respect, trust, relationships, they've been able to come up with their own initiatives on how they can align and move forward. I think what we also are finding is that others are also who are hearing of it come to us either as individuals, nonprofits, and community organizations now that wanted to be part of this network. So, for example, we invited community leaders from Hana Maui who are leading initiatives regarding community-based cultural tourism. And they participated in our accelerator last year. They'll be participating in our accelerator group next month, and they're actually implementing some of the milestones in terms of Pono leadership, perpetuating cultural values, and then also what is good for Hawaii tourism and economy.
I'm interested also in the shifts that you've seen in others, and I think we'll be talking at length with our next guests about that. We have Catherine No of CPP and Auntie Mapuana de Silva speaking with us. Two people that you don't necessarily expect to be in the same room at all times, but they're coming together to share their experience. What does that kind of a pairing tell you about this movement and the work that's happening?
Well, it speaks to the process, but it also supports the values of trust and building relationships. And if you can get to know people beyond their professional title or their work and just understand themselves as human beings, you'll make a connection. And there's something magical about that. We do these paired walks where they force you to go on a walk for like 20 minutes with people you've just met for the first time. And we've had individuals who were on opposing sides on many issues that, after that paired walk, they get to know each other. And as you go through, the retreat and you get more involved in some of our activities, you really tend to develop a special bond. And I think in Rediscovering Hawaii, so we rely on that mana or that bond to carry us through in our commitments to shape Hawaii.
I'm wondering if you can also just share how, this movement, as it continues to go on, we continue to see things evolve and happen around us, right? Of course, the devastating wildfires that happened in Maui that maybe caused some attention to be shifted towards the tragedy there and helping and supporting Maui. How would you maybe illustrate how this movement helped in that situation of being able to take something that just happens, is very important to the entire community, and seeing that process play out in real time?
A great example. I can share two. Right after the wildfire, one of our elders, Hokulani Holt from Maui, respected Hawaiian elder in Kumuhula, we already started conversations what can HEC do, because there was such a tragic loss and all hands on deck on just trying to stabilize the community. And she had recommended, what we really need is prayers and a spiritual component to help uplift the community. And so with that, we collaborated with her and the network of community kumuhulas and hula halal statewide, but also just opening it up to the public. And then with the resources from Hawaii Executive Collaborative, we started to align social media, mainstream media in broadcasting Kipuni Aloha no Maui, which was a spiritual retreat across the state that was broadcasted nationally and globally on the tragic loss of Lahaina. We got the governor, the mayor involved. We got all of the executives and our priests, our church leaders involved in helping to lead that, which was a tremendous success. And then right now, we parlayed that into helping the mayor and the city and county, the state, FEMA, and community working together to address key issues about cultural sacred places, housing, education, and so forth. So we're fairly active and taking it as we come along, but I think that comes with the work when you care about Hawaii, and the opportunity presents itself. HAC acts. Yeah.
I know you have another convening coming up where people will be invited to come. And for folks who can't attend, how can they get involved?
Sure. We have our second accelerator group, which is identifying all these different subject matter areas. And we have either organizations who are already involved or subject matter experts. But if you're interested, you can contact us at www.hawaiiso.org for more information about that. It's the ending of July 24th through the 26th. And then we welcome, others who are interested in rediscovering Hawaii so and contributing to making Hawaii a better place.
We appreciate all that you are doing with this movement. Thank you for sharing what your work is
Thank
today.
you.
We'll be right back with two more guests after this break. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight Now as we continue on in our conversation of rediscovering Hawaii. So we are now joined by two guests that will be joining us and continuing on in this conversation. We want to welcome in Catherine No from Central Pacific Bank, who will be joining us, as well as Kumuhula Mapuana de Silva. Thank you both for joining us and being part of this conversation here today. Catherine, I want to start off with you. As you began this process of being involved in this Rediscovering Hawaii Soul movement, what did you initially think about this? What were your thoughts when you got invited? And what was your overall reaction to just how things got started for you?
Well, it got started with a retreat in the middle of 2022. I received an invitation to join a convening, and I actually knew very little about what it was going to be about. I knew that we were going to have a number of Hawaiian elders there and others from the business community, and that we were going to talk about a way forward for Hawaii. But other than that, there wasn't much information. So I went in with a lot of trepidation and a lot of anxiety. And I will tell you that I would never have imagined the kind of relationships that I built and then over time with this initiative, and then also just some of the incredible progress that we're making with this movement, Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul.
Yeah, and tell us about your experience and your introduction to the movement.
The week before the retreat in August, my kind of half-brother, Corbett Kalama, called me and he said, Auntie Mapu, I really want you to come to this retreat. And I said, well, what is it about? And he, did his best to explain. And I said, well, it doesn't seem like someplace that I need to be. And he said, no, we need your perspective. And Corbett's mom is Auntie Lani Kalama, and she was my mentor. She was, after my kumu died, she became my mentor and went everywhere with us. So she was kind of like my second hula mom. And so I trusted Corbett that when he asked, and that's the reason I attended. I had no clue what I was stepping into. I was just as nervous as Catherine was. And I went into that weekend telling myself I was there to listen, not to talk. And when that kind of eased my mind a little bit, go in to listen, but then you find your voice. When the kupuna want you to say something on their behalf, then you find your voice and you're able to speak. So I was able to participate.
And I want to stay with you for a moment, if I can ask you, because I thought Kamana'o did a really nice job of kind of articulating the overall movement. But to you, when we talk about Hawaii Soul, what does that actually mean?
What does it? To me, that is our way of life. That is how we value, care for, and love our land, our resources, and our people. The soul of Hawaii needs to live in each of us, not just Native Hawaiians, because we all live here together. And I always tell everybody that, for Hawaiians, this is home. Hawaii is the only home we have. For people who are of other ethnicities, they can go to their home country. Even though Hawaii is home for them, they really could, right? The Chinese could go back to China, the Irish can go back to Ireland, and so forth. But there's no place for us to go but here. So it's really important that we care for our values, our way of life, the way we respect, the way we work together. And even through conflict, to find a way to work together. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you might, how do I want to say this? That you're going to find a way to compromise and agree. There's always going to be disagreement, but how do you live with that? That's the key. It's not that there is conflict, it's that how do you live with that conflict? And then how do you think about addressing it for the greater good of the Native population, because we don't have anywhere to go but here.
And Catherine, for someone like yourself, just in your role in a leadership position for a financial institution like Central Pacific Bank, to be invited to this opportunity to have conversation with local leaders like Auntie Mapu, but also standing side by side against some of your competitors in the other banks, it was such a unique collection, I think, of people who you would never imagine trying to find commonality. What was that perspective like from you to be able to see just those different integrations happening?
Yeah, it was incredibly special and remarkable to see. So yes, our bank, so myself representing CPB, coming together with other leaders who are competitors, but we were all there with a common goal. One, to listen. So I like the way that you started out, Mapulana, saying that, to listen and understand, and then actually to talk about things that we might be able to do together. And I think that was what was so important about that first convening, was just that kind of connection that we made with people. I heard your question earlier to Kamana'o in the earlier interview, what's different about this movement? And I think it's the time that we took to understand each other. And I remember that first paired walk with Mapuana, and just what you shared with me, and I know I mentioned to you at that point, I didn't feel I had the standing to use Hawaiian words, certainly talk about Hawaiian culture and values, and you gave me the permission and even encouraged me to get involved. So for me, it was a calling in some ways to get involved with the others in the business community, and then of course beyond the business community too.
Yeah, and Kamana'o did talk about how in Rio's Partners, in that framework, that the paired walks is a key part of the work. And so for folks who don't really understand this concept, he said, you walk with someone that perhaps you just met, someone that you wouldn't typically walk with. Tell us about the experience of the paired walk with Catherine, and how that has created this relationship that you now share.
I was really nervous about the paired walk because I didn't want to choose anybody. But immediately when the assignment was given, Catherine beeline for me. She just came right to me and said, "May I walk with you?" And if somebody invites me to walk with them, I'm going to accept that. I really didn't know who she was. I'm not a business person. I'm not in the banking community. I don't know all the leaders in business and and government and all of that. I stay in my corner of the world. So this was a big experiment kind of, and a big trust for me. But when Catherine came up to me, she just had this huge smile, and she says, "I really want to walk with you. Will you walk with me?" And I said, "Of course I'll walk with you." And we hit it off instantly. It was like we had been old friends. We had so many things in common and so many things to share with each other. And we've become friends. We go out to lunch. We're planning another lunch date or dinner date. And I never would have met her. I never would have connected with these leaders in the business community or in government if it wasn't for Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul.
We had the opportunity, of course, to be a part of that. I had my paired walk with Auntie Mapu as well, so I got to really partake and just gain so much mana'o through that. And I remember our conversations too very vividly and clearly. And one of the things that I remember us talking about was, how do we communicate this to the outside community? And I'm wondering what your experience has been like with other Native Hawaiian organizations, groups, with other spiritual leaders in our community that are respected, that may also look at this and be a little hesitant about what this all is. How have you been able to respond, and how have you been able to share the information of what this is all about?
That's a very good question. Thank you. When people ask me about what is this, they find out that I've been involved with Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul and what is it. And I tell them that we, as cultural practitioners, know what that soul is because we live it every day. And it guides us through the things we do. And that we can't just contain it in our space. We have to share it. And so when people ask about it, and then I tell them, I look at it as, number one, the scenarios that we put together. To me, it's not so much what we should do, but what we don't want to do. These are all possibilities that could happen in Hawaii. And so much of what we created is adverse to what we want. And I think that's really important, because you may not always know what you want, but if you know what you don't want, you're definitely not going to go down the wrong path. So that's one of the things. And the other thing is that I've always been a firm believer in being part of the solution instead of the problem. You can be one or the other, that's it. You can't really be in the middle. So you're going to be part of the problem by just sitting back and criticizing, or maybe even putting up roadblocks, or you're going to try to be part of the solution. This may or may not lead to solutions, but it's obvious just in the less than 2 years that we've been doing this together that they're little things that are happening that are better. These little things that are better. And we have to think about that stone, that little pebble that's dropped in the big lake where it's going to ripple out. If we do nothing, nothing's going to change. We do something, it may not be what we want in the end, but it's going to be a step to finding out where we need to go to get to the place we want to go. But doing nothing doesn't help anybody.
One of those ripples, Catherine, I would love for you to talk about that, because we know that the relationship is so important and trust is so important. But this has also actually led to changes in some of the ways that you do business at Central Pacific Bank. Can you tell us about the work with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and how this work helped to influence that?
Sure. Well, first I will say that as a result of the relationship that Mapuana and I built at the first convening, she was gracious enough to come over to our bank to speak to our executives and leaders about this Rediscovering Hawaii Soul. Kamana'o also joined that session. And that really inspired our leaders at Central Pacific Bank to do something. And so something tangible that's come out of this movement is our work with DHHL and specifically our bank finding ways to fund housing on that land. I know in years earlier, I think a lot of banks thought it was not doable, just given the fact that it's leased land and it's just very difficult to do those mortgages. But we are finding a way, and I think that's a really big part of this movement is collaborating and finding ways forward together.
And for you, Auntie Mapu, as you've begun and having these conversations, how much of it is also you feeling that you have to provide context and history and information? Because I think that was one of the foundations that was set early on, is before we can move forward on some of these issues, you have to understand what the Native Hawaiian community has gone through, what we've experienced in the past, in order to help direct. I mean, I imagine that has been a large part of the process in your role specifically, is providing that context. And how have you gone about doing that?
You're absolutely right. It has been a large part of my contribution. Like Catherine was saying, we have these groups that go out to organizations that ask for to learn about rediscovering Hawaii's soul. And as often as I can, I participate in those when I'm invited to participate. So I've been to several banks, been to the DOE, and we also had a convening with the military. So these are really important, because our voice needs to be at the table for every single one of these, so that we can not set people straight, but so that we can provide the context, like you said, Kalei, the history, the background, and to help people who don't have the eha, that hurt, that deep down, really uncomfortable feeling about living in your home and sometimes not feeling like it's your home, and feeling encroached on and overpowered by. The Native Hawaiian community is a minority in their homeland. And how do we get everyone who lives here to understand our perspective on how we come from the land, how we're born of the land? We don't sit on the land, we steward the land, we don't own it. And how do we get them to understand this so that when they're living here, they can live more with the values and history that we have and understand our struggles. So it's really important for us to be at the table. And I'm really happy that Kamana'o is almost always there. He and I think, are there as often as we can, and we try to accept those. But the Hawaiian voices, Native Hawaiian voice, is really important. And this, I have to congratulate and mahalo Hawaii Executive Collaborative for making sure that our voice is at the table, that our elders are at the table, and that we are listened to.
Yeah, and what I hear you describing is a lot of deep pain, right? And what's also interesting about what Catherine shared is this wanting to participate, but trepidation of, I'm not Native Hawaiian. Can I participate? How can I participate while being respectful? And the tendency could be for some folks to just say, that's too dangerous. I'm just not going to ruffle any feathers. So tell me a little bit about this whole idea. I don't know if permission is the right word, but giving people access and the ability to participate, and why you think that's important.
I think that's really important, because without that, our communities are segregated. They're split, right? There has to be some collaboration, but we all have to understand what our roles are and where that collaboration might stop. We can't just sit here as Native Hawaiians and criticize those who are not Native Hawaiian about the work that they're doing in our homeland. We need to know how to inform them, educate them, bring them in so that the work that they do enhances back what we want. And this is CPB finding a way to help fund DHL homes is a perfect example of why it's important for us to engage. It doesn't mean that everything across the board we're just going to engage and be swallowed up. We have to be smart about it, but we have to come to the table because we have to figure out how to live together in this beautiful place that everybody wants to live in. How do we live together but not forget the original ancestors of this land? We can't ever forget that, ever. Everybody has to understand that we are here for a short time and that there are generations of Native Hawaiians who've been here from before contact, and we can't just forget about them because this is a new generation. That has to carry through to the future and to our children. And sometimes we sit back as Native Hawaiians and we see they don't understand, they don't know, they're not feeling the hurt and all of this. And so really important. I think I'm getting lost in my words, but really important for us to be there, for us to share where we can. And it doesn't, I'm a talker, I'm a sharer. I'm a person who tries best to keep peace and keep focusing on that, the positive and the aloha spirit. And this may not bode well with everybody. Everybody has to find their place in this process if they want it. And that's the thing about HEC is they're not forcing it on any of us. They're opening the doors, sharing what they feel, what they know, what they've learned, and it's up to us whether we want to participate or not. I find that my participation, I hear time and time again, thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you, I didn't know that. Thank you, I understand more. Thank you, I'll remember to ask the next time. And so for me, that's important, that communication, education, and compassion, we all need to share it across the board.
Catherine, I wonder if you can provide a little context about just that initial meeting and some of the topics that were discussed, because through that first initial discussion, the group really identified some of the key issues as well as the scenarios that have been published and talked about different paths that Hawaii could be heading towards if something doesn't change. What was that process like to determine some of the issues and some of the processing? And just if you can talk about the collaboration and discussions that were happening between those core leadership during those initial meetings.
Sure. So at that first convening, the beginning of the sessions was really a lot about what Mapuana was describing. It was the hurt and the pain and history that you shared with me, but then others shared as well. And I thought that was a really important part of the convening, because the things that we're talking about, like housing, like the environment, things that we aspire to, the goals that we have set are really important. But I think the more important thing coming out of this this movement is how we get there. And it took the time so the paired walk, the time that we spent together with other leaders, building that kind of emotional connection that led to the building of trust, and then the building of a relationship that will result in our being able to more effectively collaborate out there. Because it's not just the problems of today, and there are many, and we talk a lot about them, and there are various tracks as part of Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul that we're addressing. But there are going to be problems in the future too. And so I think these trusted relationships that we have are really important to our addressing those problems down the road, as well as the ones that we're facing today.
Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. It goes so fast. But I want to make sure that I ask both of you, and Catherine, I'll start with you, with where you hope this goes. Where do you hope what do you hope this movement leads to?
My hope is that this movement leads to every person in Hawaii, feeling this commitment to perpetuating Hawaii's soul. And then I even have this vision that it's something we can take beyond Hawaii. So I know we really have talked today about Hawaii, and that is very important. But I think that what we have here is something special that this country and this world even could benefit from today.
Wow, and that would be exploring these relationships and building trust beyond these shores.
Yes, yes.
And same question for you. What do you hope this leads to?
I hope this leads to change. I hope this leads to change in the way leadership looks at Hawaii and looks at the Hawaiian people and understands why we sit on Mauna Kea, why we will sit at Haleakala, Hunananiho, and why this is our soul that we're not going to give up. I hope that all of this work leads to better future for Hawaii, for our children and grandchildren. And I agree with Catherine that Hawaii can be the answer to the world. We can. And just the last 2 weeks, having the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture here, I've the one who's been sitting on the council since 2000, and I'm the one who put in the bid for the festival to be here, and have been helpful, I hope, in bringing the festival here and enriching all of our people. And I think the for lack of a better word, the Aloha spirit, just the essence of who we are as Native Hawaiians and as a people who live in Hawaii, to share that with all of our cousins across the Pacific was an enormous undertaking, but a really positive movement. It was a movement on how we can be. If we can do this with the Pacific coming here, we can do this for the world.
I would be remiss if we didn't ask you about FestPAC. I know we just have like 2 minutes
2
left.
seconds.
But do you see parallels in the work with Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul and what happened over the last few days?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the council that houses, in which the festival is housed under, the festival is just one of the issues that we tackle. We tackle intellectual property, intellectual property rights, Native rights. We tackle gender equality, women's equality, education, children, all of these things. And all of the issues that we have here in Hawaii are issues that all of the Pacific has. We are the largest continent. We don't think of ourselves as islands. We think of ourselves as the Pacific continent. We are larger than the rest of the world put together. You can put all the countries in the world in the Pacific, and the Pacific Ocean is bigger. So we never feel connected from our island brothers and sisters. We feel, disconnected by the ocean. We are connected by the ocean. The ocean is our continent. And they are, you've got New Caledonia, right? They're in uprising right now because they want independence from France. You've got Papua New Guinea all of these countries, Guam, all of the countries, which is what you heard at the closing ceremonies, are all facing struggles. And what is going to bring us through these struggles? It's our perception of our future, our hope for our future. That's what's going to bring us to a better place.
Well, that's a great way to kind of close this discussion. We want to thank both of you for being here and providing context into how this movement of rediscovering Hawaii Soul has impacted you both. And we look forward to seeing wonderful things continue to happen through the work that HEC and this movement is doing. So thank you so much for being here. We'll be back right after this break. Spotlight Now will be back after this short message. Stay tuned.
Mahalo.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, a very insightful conversation there that we had multiple guests talking about rediscovering Hawaii Soul and what that looks like. Starting off that conversation, of course, with Kamana'o Crab, providing the context of what this movement is all about and really hearing from him about how much this has grown so much in such a short time.
Yeah, over 300 organizations now taking part. And you heard there on a more personal level from Catherine No of CPB and Auntie Mapuana de Silva talking about their personal relationship, but how that has actually led to meaningful change at the bank and beyond. Just amazing to see the ripple effect. If you want to learn more, you can go to hawaiisoul.org or also check our archive, because we've had Governor John Waihee on here talking about this, Dwayne Kurisu, John Osorio, a number of different guests talking about this movement and what it means to them.
And really the one context that you continue to hear, and one of the questions I asked is how is this different? Because this isn't anything new. We have seen other groups try to really unite the Native Hawaiian voice to be able to work alongside some of our political leaders and community leaders like Catherine No in the banking community. But there really hasn't been much leeway and success thus far. And really there is a much of different feeling from everyone that we've discussed and talked to so far, that this just feels different and that this is based on some of that trust. And a lot of that work that is done before they even get to the issues is really building those relationships. So we'll continue to bring you more discussions about rediscovering Hawaii Soul and really get into more specific topics throughout the year and diving deeper into how this movement is helping some of the issues that are impacting Hawaii.
Yeah, I love these conversations. So thanks for being a part of this one. Next week, Mayor Rick Blangiardi will be on. He'll be talking about some issues facing the city, talking about the latest with the Honolulu Rail project and the leadership there. Also his budget getting approved by the city council. Always a lot to talk about with the mayor.
Yeah, looking forward to that conversation. We want to thank you for tuning into Spotlight Now. We'll see you right back here next week, Tuesday. Aloha.